I'm Councillor Gerard Hargreaves and I'm Chair of the committee. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. Members of the public and media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place this evening. Before we proceed, I would ask members of the committee and others in attendance to please make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off. And I think it will be appropriate for us to start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. So to join me in that, please. Thank you. I plan to take the meeting in the order of the agenda. So item number 1, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Ken Sullivan. Thank you. There are no other apologies. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Do any members have an interest to declare?
Yeah, I'm on the board of public sector audit appointments.
Thank you. Any other interests? Move to item number 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the meeting that took place on the 21st of July have been circulated to committee members, and we've had an amended version of that after some corrections were made. So of the amended version we've just received, are the committee happy that I sign those as a record of our meeting? Agree. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to item number 4, which is the audit planning report for 2024-25. The council's draft 24-25 statement of accounts was published on the council website on the 30th of June 2025. The external auditors Grant Thornton have been auditing their set of accounts, and this report contains their observations of the council and the pension fund. So Mike, are you going to kick us off with this, or we just go straight to Darren? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we have 2 reports under this item, and if I say a few words in respect of the audit findings report for the council, and then Paul will say a few words on the pension fund, and then clearly we're happy to answer any questions you may have. The summary report from the officers covering report provides an accurate summary of the audit findings report for the council, so I won't repeat the detail of that, but I'll just say a few words just to contextualise the audit findings. From our perspective, we think the quality of accounts presented for audit were of a good high quality. They were appropriately and well supported by a suite of working papers, and we had strong engagement from officers throughout, from the start through to this point in time, and would like to place on record our thanks for that strong support. I think it's fair to say, though, that both sides recognise that the change in the general ledger this year did affect the pace of the audit, to the point that when we've reported our position to you, there are a number of areas that are still work in progress. We are continuing to close those down, and I'm not anticipating anything significant to emerge from those. There will, however, be further items that we need to report to you, and we will do that through the arrangements you've set out as part of the officer's report. The areas that we will need to report, there's nothing significant. There are some changes on disclosure notes, and some of those have been amended and presented in the accounts before you tonight. There are one or two items that haven't been amended for, which is principally the reason that we will need to report to you. But there's nothing there that is of concern to me. There's no changes to the risk profile that we presented in the audit plan and it's repeated in the audit findings report. And the only other thing I wanted to say is that my predecessor has now completed the objection that was in respect of the 23-24 audit. And so he should be in a position to certify the completion of that audit towards the end of October, which will then create a platform for us to certify the 24-25 audit once the National Audit Office has given us the green light because it's completed its work on the whole of government accounts. That's all I was going to say on the Council's audit findings report. Paul will just cover the pension fund audit findings report.
Thank you.
So the pension fund, very much the same good news story as the council accounts. We've now completed all our field work and we're now going through our closing processes on the pension fund accounts. The working papers and accounts are of a very good standard. Management were actively engaged with us in the audit and it's got us to a good position where the field work is complete. We've identified probably one misstatement I should bring to your attention, which is a 9.7 million overstatement of the investment balance. This wasn't due to the fault of the council at all. They prepared the accounts on the estimates provided by the fund manager at the time. The fund manager later on then finalises their reports, and there's a difference between the two. This difference isn't material, and management has decided not to adjust for it. But that's probably the main finding, just to bring to your attention. There are a couple of other minor adjustments, but they weren't any significant at all. That's probably all I want to say on the pension fund, to be honest. It was a good set of accounts.
Thank you. And thank you for the work done on that. Darren, can you just explain a little bit to us the difference between signing off the accounts and certification? Because it's useful that we've got that clear.
Yes.
Please.
So there's two stages. The first is giving the opinion of a true and fair view on the financial statements themselves, which we will be able to do. The second element, and that's encapsulated in the code of audit practice set by the National Audit Office, is that we formally have to certify the completion of the audit each year. There are instances when we're unable to certify the completion of an audit. So, for example, in 23-24, when there was a formal objection to the accounts. So in 23-24, we gave the opinion on the financial statements by the end of September, beginning of October, but we haven't yet certified the formal completion of that audit. It's a statutory requirement. We need to do it. Now that the objection for 23-24 has been considered, we're able to do that very shortly. For 24-25, we intend to issue an unqualified opinion on the financial statements. We have completed our consideration of value for money or arrangements, and that's the next item on our agenda. The one item that stops us formally certifying the completion of the 24-25 audit is waiting to get the green light from the National Audit Office that requires no more information from auditors of local government to allow it to undertake its whole of government accounts work.
And any idea when that will be, or that's completely crystal ball, is it?
I don't have a clear picture at the moment, but it's fair to say that the NAO gave us the confirmation that it required no more information from us as local auditors for the 23-24 financial year, only a month or so ago.
Okay. Liz, do you want to
That's what I was
comment on
going to ask, sorry, about the 23-24, how long that took to get through.
But just simply, in terms of our council and the information we've given and the information you've audited, there's nothing outstanding from us, and that's why you're able to sign off the accounts. but not certify them because of that national requirement.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Did you want to comment on that?
Um,
It's a complex thing. I think it's important that people understand that
And also, it wasn't highlighted last year, because I did look through the audit findings and there was nothing about the whole government accounts and the National Audit Office. So that's what really drew it to my attention this year.
okay.
But I think you've been very clear, and thank you very much for that.
So should we just do any questions or comments on the council's audit, and then we can do the pension audit? I know it's part of the same thing, but we'll just do that. Okay, Paul, we'll just do the general first. Okay. Comments, thoughts, questions? All right.
I had a couple of questions. One was about the two-stage authorization journals. Do you have comments on that? Is that confirming of it?
So I think I think we've reported that on your old general ledger, you had an arrangement where journals weren't authorised. That was to be corrected, and on your new general ledger, and on the whole, that's the case. What we're highlighting here is that the journals associated with tax, those journals in themselves, are not separately and independently authorised. We have looked, we haven't identified any issues with that. And I think, as I understand it, that's not going to be the case going forward.
In terms of tax journals, Oracle doesn't allow us to have a separate approval system. But there are only about 3 officers in the council who are using or posting tax journals on a monthly basis, so the risk is really low.
Just on page 23, you identify adjustments and you say that they have impact on the balance sheet and cash flow statement. My understanding is certain of those adjustments also impact the CIES.
I think there was at least one adjustment that impacted on the CIES, and that's in respect of an accrual that was posted the wrong way.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Couple of questions. For me, and I've been reading a few of these accounts for a few years now, they seem to do more corrections, and whether they're going to be taken on board next year or this year than previous years. Do you put that down to the fact that the team will soon transition to Oracle, or do you think there's something that we need to pay more attention to next year? The team does.
So my judgment and reviewing your accounts for the last few years is there are slightly more kind of smaller errors that we fixed up this year than previous years, and that could well be the change in transition of a new generation system. And when we all get other authorities have gone through the same process, you do generally find more errors and stuff as people transfer systems. So it's not unusual in this circumstance. I mean, I can't be 100% sure, but that is where I would say. You obviously need more training on the new systems to be up to speed. Putting accounts together on a new system for the first time is always more trying than a system that the team are used to.
Do anybody? Yeah,
Just to add to that, so as you're probably aware, I think we've spoken about this before, and we closed down the old systems app and we moved to Oracle. There was a 2-week window where we didn't have access, so we squashed the timetable by 2 weeks to achieve that end of June deadline. So actually, that took a bit of our time away where we would have done maybe a little bit more due diligence to maybe take out some of those minor errors that you referred to. So that could be part of it as well.
But just having mentioned Oracle, you mentioned in the report you were quite happy with the way the transition had gone and the way that had no real impact on the accounts as such, with a few errors there. Do you want to just enlighten us on that a bit, please?
Yes, it was just to say that whenever there's a change in a general ledger, we always ensure that what's been processed on the old system, that we're happy is completely and accurately transferred to the new system. So we undertook various audit testing to ensure that had happened, and we were satisfied it had.
That's credit to the team as well, isn't it? Because that was a huge project, and this was running at the parallel to it. So thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Got a couple of questions. Page 39, looking at the valuation of investment property. It says in the final sentence on the summary of management's approach that there was a net increase of £2 million property. And I just had a quick bit of research before this meeting. The ONS say that commercial property increased by about 3% in the same year. The land registry is that 2.8% increase. Yeah, this seems as if there's only a 0.8% increase in the valuation of property. And I just wanted to ask both the internal and the external, where have those figures come from? And when the external valuation specialists, I guess Wilkes, Helen, Eve, has been mentioned here, did their checking, why did they not come up with a different figure? And if they did come up with a different figure, what is that figure? I was just a bit concerned that the growth in valuation of property seems slightly low.
Thank you. So I can't recall the link back to the national trends. And clearly the national trends give that broader picture, and the valuation movement for yourselves will be distinct based on your investment portfolio. So I can't really comment on that. But what I would say is the council had its investment portfolio valued by its own valuer. We engaged Wilkes, Head and Eve as our expert, and they assessed both the instructions from the council to its valuer and the report from the council's valuer for reasonableness and appropriateness. And then we also sample selected a number of investment properties and sought Wilkes, Head and Eve's view on the resultant valuation from the council's valuer. And there were no issues that were raised or concerns that were identified.
And we'll come on to investment properties and the pension fund later, but I just wanted to just flag that, but thank you for that. And I have a question in relation to the £22 million. On big page 51, also Cochrane and Ackland Road. It says in the paragraph that properties have not been revalued. And my question is, given that they hadn't been revalued at that time, leading to a what looks like a 22.2 million statement, what change in processes have now happened in relation to governance that can be prevented from happening again? And what checks that the external auditors do to make sure that the governance have changed to reflect that this will be prevented in future?
I think in the management response, we have said that we will be reviewing all assets under construction that have been moved into dwellings, just to make sure that the valuations are massively different. We will engage the values where we need to. With this one, it was because the assets are transferred into dwellings as opposed to land and buildings. When it's a dwelling, the valuation is quite different because it's social housing, which is why it has a bigger sort of difference. So
it was transferred into dwellings by mistake?
No, it wasn't transferred into dwellings. Sorry, it was transferred into dwellings, but it wasn't revalued.
Right.
Usually we revalue the following year after acquisition, or when we transfer an asset from asset under construction. So because we were following that process, we hadn't done the revaluation, and it would have normally been picked up in the following year. So what we're going to do now going forwards is, even though these have been moved in by the end of the year, we will still look at them to see whether they need a revaluation in case there's a material
Within that year.
Within that year. Okay, so the process has changed, but it hasn't changed.
It has changed.
It has changed
going forward.
Right, so it's changed going forward.
Yeah.
And then the question was, have the external auditors checked to make sure the process has now actually formally changed? Or have you not checked? You've
So
not checked that?
we haven't checked,
Fine.
but we will. We would follow up quite naturally as part of next year's audit.
And then my final question, Chair, if I may, is on page 61. which was the follow-up and prior year recommendations. And this is the second assessment where you identified that there were some bank account reconciliations that were undertaken on a timely basis. I noted in the comments here, it said that the bank reconciliations weren't done because someone was on secondment. So I'm asking the question again, have the governance processes been changed so that if someone is on secondment, then there aren't things that slip through the gaps because people aren't there?
Absolutely. So, yeah, they have been. We've got sort of training video and notes so someone else can pick up. We've got permanent member of staff now in place who have been doing reconciliations. So as far as we're concerned now, every month there should be a reconciliation. So bank practice for June, July and August have been done and signed off. So we're at the end of September now. So we'll make sure that those continue being signed off every month.
And then my last question, you also obviously check that the new governance processes are appropriate in place. Have they been checked or not? They've not been checked for this year.
We checked and audited the March 2025 bank reconciliation. We haven't necessarily looked at those subsequent bank reconciliations.
So that will be reflected in the following years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Gardner.
Can I just ask a few technical questions about, for example, your fees and your audit service? This is page 66. It's always that certification salary benefits claim is 45,000 plus 1,500 a day optional vesting, additional testing. It's always 60,000 every year, and it's always the same. So I question, actually, should it not just be 60,000 including 15 days? I mean, do you ever flex that additional days? Because I've never seen that change from there.
It may not have changed here, but I can assure you across many authorities it does change.
And then on page 70, you talk about data going, you utilise colleagues overseas, primarily in India and the Philippines. And I noticed you talk about a virtual desktop interface, which is related to the data stay in the UK. But what about security? Because it's all very well, you've still got pen and paper, you've got phone cameras that you can take. I can't step that acknowledge that the council information may not be the most interesting to be yes, thank you. But what is the security aspect behind this? Because the focus seems to be on data as opposed to security and data.
So when we use overseas staff, it's always overseas staff of the Grant Thornton International Network. All of our machines and all of our software are encrypted. There's password controls. So the level of security that we have here in the UK is replicated across the world for all of the GT firms. So I don't think there's any concern on our data protection and management aspect.
But you're clearly not taking the view that you're exporting data under the Data Protection Act.
No, because
Because
it's the servers are UK based and the overseas staff tap in through into the UK servers.
Fascinating. I just don't think the legislation's moved up with the virtual desk space, but thank you. That's
Thank you. Sorry.
Got one more question, which is on page 59, which refers to the annual incident response exercise tested before the end of 25-26. Is that still on track?
Anyone still response exercise? Sorry, what was the question?
Sorry, so it says here in response to a bit of an AMBER assessment, that the first annual incident response exercise has been programmed and will be tested before the end of 25-26.
Yeah.
Is that still on track to take place?
Yeah, they wouldn't tell me a date.
It's going to be a surprise.
They
Yeah.
have a really
Yeah.
big exercise.
Okay. Thanks.
So beginning to move on to the pensions one, looking at the errors that you highlighted in both the reports, Are you happy that those are, if you like, being corrected, and that there's no underlying errors that will reasons for those errors as we go forward? They're just really errors that crop up, they're identified, and they're amended.
For both the pension fund and the council, the larger and the vast majority of the errors that we've highlighted have been amended for. There are the 9.7 million on the pension fund that Paul mentioned around the investment valuation, that hasn't been amended for. And I think for the council, there is one or two errors that haven't been amended for, but we are talking in the realms of $1 million to $2 million. So it's not in any sense material and wouldn't affect the audit opinion on the financial statement.
It's probably worth saying about the 9.7 million. It's probably not an error either, because the council put their accounts together on the best information they had at the time. So once they subsequently got the final, obviously the figures are slightly different, which we find everywhere.
And from the errors, there's no underlying common themes amongst them that would raise any concerns?
No, I mean, we do think about that. We do try and consider if there's a pattern or if all the errors are in one direction, but that's not something that was apparent.
Going back to the actions from the last financial year, obviously you reported on those. Generally, they've been enacted upon. A couple are still ongoing. Any comments you'd like to make on those? Or are you happy that those have been addressed, and the ones that are still being addressed, they are still being addressed for good reasons?
I don't think there's anything of concern, though. The one that perhaps wasn't fully implemented was the bank account reconciliations, and you've just heard about the plan to ensure that those are happening regularly. So based on that, there's nothing that I would highlight as a concern.
Thank you. Anything more before we move on to pensions? Okay, any general comments? Phil's here, so we've got to make him sure he's earned his money for being here. Any questions, any comments on the pensions side? Again, a genuine and good report, so thank you to your team for all the hard work you did during the year and preparing the accounts to get them here. So any specific observations you can make in those?
Thank you, Chair. So just a quick one, obviously on the property again, page 101. We know that Sanderson and Weatherall are the valuers. Is there any potential conflict of interest there that means that you should have a different valuer for the pension fund property rather than the council property? That's not conflict of interest.
They're still independent. And that's the same valuer, the council and pension fund property, got the council too.
And then just commenting on the increase in value, there's obviously quite significant for the council one. If anything you wanted to add to that, about 28% increase rather than 4.8% increase on the council property.
I think you've probably bought a few more. I think that's the main reason.
So our target is 5% of a 2 billion pension funds. At the moment, the target would be 400 million. Significant numbers have been acquired. Even last week, we were completing on a property in Covent Garden, and the programme will continue to roll on until such time as we hand over the responsibility to Paul. That will be end of March.
2026.
My only query about Sanderson Weatherall was I'm unclear how long we've been using them for, and whether or not, at what point we look at an alternative valuer.
I think you haven't been using them for that long. I think it's 2 or 3 years, because you used to have JLL, didn't you? Do your valuation.
3 years.
3 years, so that's not bad. That's okay.
And what would you recommend as a line?
What, 5? I mean, I think that otherwise they just get a bit entrenched, just too familiar, and it's good to have some external challenge. I mean, 2 or 3 years is nothing. That's fine, but I think it's something that we need to keep under review.
And any comments on that in terms of?
Yes, I think that this was a service that was contracted by our property department within Royal Borough. And as you say, typically of a contract at this time would be maybe 3 years plus an option to extension. So I can check as to where we stand on that and maybe include a response in the minutes as to exactly where we are.
Okay. But as you say, it's 1 or 2, 3 years at the moment, so we are there, but it's a very good observation. Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, for page 109, this whole timing issue and the reliance on one set of accounts on the other. And frankly, is there anything we can do going forward that we can marry the documents up better? And certainly also, I know with the annual account, the annual report not due until December, there's just a massive disconnect between council accounts, the pension funds, and the other supporting documentation. And I'm very conscious on page 109, you say the audit of the administrating authorities yet to conclude, therefore we cannot give an opinion on these procedures in point in time. Can I ask, are you expecting to be able to sign off almost simultaneously when we can sign off the council accounts?
So there is a consultation underway with SEPFA as we speak on this question of the separation between the rural boroughs accounts and the pension fund accounts, and specific questions set out, should they be signed off at the same time, or given that the pension fund accounts can probably be done a bit quicker, then why shouldn't we be able to sign off at an earlier time? Which is a valid question. So we will engage with that and make a suitable response. My personal view is that we could maybe get the pension fund accounts out of the way more quickly.
And that's a national consultation, is it?
It is, yes.
As if there are a lot of reforms going on in local authority accounting, because I think it's a general view, but it's just got far too complex. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments on this item? Agenda. Risk profiling, nothing you would wish to comment on in terms of anything about our risk profile from the accounts?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, given what we've just said to you about the quality of the draft accounts, the level of findings that we've highlighted, despite some of the concerns that maybe the quantum is greater than prior years, I still think the quantum of findings is not a level that would raise concerns for me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks again, Matt, to your team for doing what they've done. Let's get us a good audit.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to the whole team, and thank you to the auditors. I think we've found you easy to work with as a committee. You've always been open and kept us abreast of things. So thank you very much indeed for that. Committee, if we look at paragraph 2 of the opening table, recommendations. This is what we need to do now, please. So the committee is asked to note the finding, audit recommendations and manage responses within the audit finding report. Are we happy to note those?
Yeah.
Committee is asked to approve the 2024-25 audited statement of accounts. Are we happy to approve that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. In the event of further updates are required after the meeting, the committee delegates authority to the chair and the chair of the committee and the section 151 officer to approve the final version of the 24-25 audited statement of accounts on their behalf. Are you happy for that to happen?
Yes.
Really outstanding. Thank you very much, and thanks a lot to the team for that. We now move on to item number 5. Annual report of the Council's value for money arrangements for the 24-25. Item 5 is the annual report of the Council's value for money arrangements for 24-25. This report contains the findings of the external auditor's findings in relation to the Council's value money arrangements over that period. The report also contains the management responses. So who is going to lead us on this? You again, Darren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So just as a way of reminder, we're required to provide a balanced commentary on your arrangements for ensuring the financial sustainability of the council, that you have good and appropriate governance arrangements, and that you deliver efficiency and effectiveness and economy in the resources that are available to you. Where we think that your arrangements don't accord with good practice, or where we think they are deficient, we determine if they are so deficient that we would describe them as a significant weakness. Pleased to say that we haven't identified any significant weaknesses. We also, through the arrangement, have an opportunity to make any improvement recommendation, and we've highlighted and made 3 improvement recommendations which officers have accepted. I think that position of no significant weaknesses and a small number of improvement recommendations reflects a strong framework of local arrangements that have been established and implemented. So that's a positive. The only thing I was going to highlight to you is that this year we did a deeper dive into the arrangements to comply with the Procurement Act and the procurement regulations, which came into force in February of this year, and also recognising the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act that came into effect in September. And we highlight and report our findings to you on page 327 of the report. I think we've made an improvement recommendation around that, but broadly we felt that your arrangements were appropriate, and where there were opportunities, it was clear that there was still work in progress. That's all I was going to say, Chair.
And actually, your comments that the procurement is improving is good to hear, because, as you know, the committee have raised issues on that in the past, and I think it's something that we as a council have worked hard at getting better, in creating the team, beefing the team up. So it's good that you've recognised that, but there's still more we can do. Okay, Liz.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you very much. I think it's very helpful. I note, I've got two comments. I note on page 317, you say that we've got a savings target for the current financial year, 25-26, which is 29% higher. Then you go on to detail some figures. And I just wondered, we are now halfway through that 25-26. I just wondered how that was panning out, because this all reads very much as though it's looking into the future. And then also, I noticed we have an improvement recommendation, internal audit planning, delivery and deferral reporting on page 324. And I just wondered if you felt, I mean, I think internal audit did a good job, but I wondered if you felt there were any sort of resourcing issues, if it was adequately resourced, and that's why some of these failings were happening.
I think the first question is probably more to officers.
I can pick the first one up. So the first one is in-year savings. We do report in-year savings every quarter as part of the financial monitoring report to the leadership team. I think it's high 80% that we're on target to deliver at the moment. Yeah, pretty good. And obviously we're pushing to increase that number, but I'll confirm the number. I don't want to give you the wrong number at this point in time. That was the leadership team Q1, and then we'll bring a Q2 leadership team from the year and Q3 and then out. But we are, and there's a whole appendices in that report which I can give you a link to as well. So you can have that. I'll give it to you via the minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And for the internal audit, I think we couldn't quite confirm this. What we were highlighting was the fact there were a high number of deferred audits in 23-24, a reduced number of deferred audits in 24-25, which could be a combination of either internal audits, capacity or resources, or the services themselves requesting audits to be deferred. What we couldn't see was clarity of the reasons coming to this committee to ensure that you were satisfied with those reasons. And that's the focus of the recommendation that they make to you.
All right.
I had one question on page 315, just refers to the 2% inflation assumption, and obviously that unfortunately got exceeded. I just wanted to, so then we'll have to go and make sure that's matched on the ethics this year. But are we going to be, I mean, it's obviously impossible to say, are we going to guess properly next time, but are we, going to make sure that we're not being unduly optimistic about inflation assumptions or indeed any other assumption?
Yes, so it's like we made an assumption of 3% for next year.
Sorry,
An assumption of 3% at the moment in our
it
medium.
still sounds quite, it's lower than it's
Current
current.
strategy, but we're keeping an eye on that at the moment because we know that's a little bit low.
Yeah.
We're obviously working on the budget now for future years, but we're definitely aware that we need to keep an eye on that. But we do always set aside some money in contingency as well to cover it.
I think it's also worth saying that most of our staff below executive level, their pay is negotiated across London. So actually it gets put on us to, we are part of that negotiating table. We're at the table, but we're not part of the negotiating team. So it's actually out of our hands as well.
But then probably you've got to be taken into account that if they're going to pay, which will be in line with the general pressures. So yeah, I take your point. We, if it was up to us, we'd probably keep it down, but.
I think we were surprised by the pay award. We didn't expect it to be that much. It was surprised. But hopefully next year it will be less the case. But it is very hard to call.
Yeah.
Thank
How's
you.
it
Page 318, we talk about the gross total debt, very last line. Where do you think, and this may as much be for Mike, what do you think our capacity or ability to handle debt is? Because you just see the interest that needs to be paid to just keep it going. And I noticed later on with the fact how that interest rate has gone up because we've been moving from longer term to shorter term debt. So I just look at that and I go, where is the appetite going forward? Where do you get to the tipping point as to, is there something that you would recommend that actually you shouldn't be more than this side of the equation as opposed to that side of the equation?
No, there isn't. We wouldn't recommend where we would be. I think the whole drive from SIPA and its arrangements around borrowing is to ensure that each authority assesses that where it seeks to borrow, it has the capacity to service that debt.
And I think and we do think we do. And but we do look at it as part of the budget process. We look at the debt that we need for capital and there are some, we do look at that as part of the process. I mean, it mentions EFS here, and obviously we have essential financial support with regards to rental compensation, but we've got coverage for that. We have plans to repay that. We very much would resist exceptional financial support for anything else to support the revenue budget. 1 in 10 councils, I believe, now are actually in exceptional financial support, so they're borrowing for revenue purposes, being forced to, in effect, balance their budgets. But and that's something we will resist at all costs. And having a good, strong budget process and balancing the budget is the way to do that. But capital, borrowing for capital, which I think is more reasonable, we keep that under review as well.
Any more comments on this paper? Again, you made some comments on procurement practices, which again is good. Bearing in mind the focus that we put on that. So that's good. I'm going to go back to the cover sheet and see what we need to do on this. So, recommendation. The committee is asked to note the findings and recommendation of the annual report from Grant Thornton and the management responses. Are we happy to note that? Thank you. So we now move on to item number 6, the assurance report. This report provides an overview of the work of the internal audit up to August 2025. Sorry, we need to move in the chair. Thank you very much. Thank you. Same time, same place next year.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, there's a chair.
Go on then.
Why are you need?
Fine.
Do you move down?
I'll move down.
Good. So this report provides an overview of the work of internal audit up to August 2025. 6 audits have been completed and 5 have received positive assurance. Maura, are you going to lead the report in this, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first report of this year. The last one that came to you was obviously the annual assurance report. We're trying a different format slightly, and you'll note that we've included audit and fraud because they are very closely aligned. And we're trying to build this up as a much more overall assurance report. So hopefully you'll see that in time, and I'll pick up on that as well a bit later when we talk about digital. So of the audits that were completed, as you'll see, 5 of them had positive assurance opinions. I just wanted to bring to your attention something that brought to my attention, which is that the table on page 362 had an error in it. I apologise. One of the recommendations was recorded against the cemeteries and burials contract and should have been against St Anne's Nursery. So that will be corrected going forward. With progress on follow-ups, a point that's been fed back to us that it would be helpful to highlight which of the follow-ups are new to the committee in a particular reporting period. I will make sure that happens in the future, but just for information, the environment and neighbourhoods, parks and landscapes, there's an extra recommendation that still needs to be followed up. There's one on capital programme monitoring that still needs to be followed up, and one on St Anne's Nursery. The housing estate care is there from previously. But I have some colleagues with me today who were involved in the audit, which received limited assurance. It was an audit of the quality impact assessments and equalities. So with me, I've got Cindy, who's my audit manager, who actually did the audit. And we've also got Joe, who was corporate strategy, and Jamie, who's HR and AD, because it's quite a cross-cutting piece of work, and we all need to kind of work together to make improvements in this area. So I'm sure that Cindy will just say a few words about what she did, and then we'll have to say questions.
Good, good.
Okay, so we completed a piece of work on the quality impact assessment and the qualities. Quality impact assessment is part of the public sector quality's duty to ensure that if we're making any changes to services, projects, policies, that we consider how this may impact the residents, looking at the protected characteristics. So we did a piece of work on that. In order for me to be able to provide adequate assurance, I also looked at qualities, because in order for you to complete an quality impact assessment, you need to have an understanding of what qualities mean, and how you're able to come to a judgment to say is this positive impact, neutral, or negative impact. It was a good piece of work. I know we've got limited assurance, but we had high engagement. So in terms of coverage, we had Maxine involved. We also, I think I spoke to all the executive directors bar one. I spoke to a number of directors, heads of services, managers, frontline staff, back end staff. In terms of sampling, we looked at key decisions, executive decisions, and we looked at just normal policy changes as well, or any projects that happened, and that was included in our sampling. In terms of outcomes, we sort of changed the way we did our reporting to focus on key things, which could support Joe and Jamie in terms of actioning some of the recommendations. So in terms, we split the report in terms of EQIAs and then qualities.
So in terms of EQIAs, the main focus or main recommendations were around data. In order to complete the quality impact assessment, you need to have adequate data to be able to inform your decisions or determine your outcome. And also training in terms of completing a form and actually understanding equality generally. So things like intersectionality, equity, those things matter when you're completing EQIAs. And also monitoring, which got a high red rating because sometimes we're completing the forms, but not necessarily following up on those outcomes. And then qualities focus in terms of the cross-council approach. Sometimes we are completing EQIAs, but you probably may want to touch in with other services as well to better inform your decisions with your form. The ED&I strategy, obviously we have the fair action plan, in order to ensure that we are pushing forward with what we have said. We need to be linking up EQIAs with this as well. And collaboration, so we've got Joe and Jamie here because in terms of our work, we did internal focus and also external. So we looked at residents in terms of how they were impacted with decisions, and we also looked at the workforce in terms of policy changes there. So Joe and Jamie have been heavily involved when the group was completed, testing was done. They came together to sort of respond to the observations and recommendations, and that's the summary that's been provided in the report. But I'll probably pass on to Joe and Jamie to probably add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, just to say, I think this is a really interesting report because it crosses the whole council in a way.
Yeah.
Often the reports we get on a specific area of the council's work, but this is right across the council. And also, it's always good for us to hear what it was like to be audited, and because we often get the reports of the audit. It's nice to be able to chat to people who actually have the audit done. So do you want to just sort of
Sure. Yeah.
your thoughts from it?
So I'm Jamie, I'm the Director of HR and OD, and I came in at quite close to the end of the audit in night. But when I landed in January, I was really pleased that this work was underway. Actually, I think it's so crucial that we're doing this. I think for me personally, from an HR perspective, just really embracing the audit and what's found, and actually that gives us a sense of purpose and direction in terms of where we want to go to next with regards to equality, diversity, and inclusion. What I would say about Cindy and the audit, it was really, really honest and constructive. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I think it was needed. And actually, you come up with some great suggestions for us to take on board, I think. And my team are already thinking actively in terms of where we can take things next. Some actions are already in train, which is brilliant. There's clearly lots to do there, though, and I have to signal that as something because there are a lot of recommendations there, but we're confident we can achieve it. And it's a great opportunity, I suppose. So thank you, Cindy.
Great, and I don't do that. So I have responsibility for the corporate strategy team, which includes our equalities lead, who kind of leads the council's work on equalities and working with colleagues across the organisation. And we have responsibility for the coordination of the Fair Action Plan, which, as Cindy mentioned, is the sort of council's equalities, diversity and inclusion strategy and looks both externally at our work on equalities and internally. We worked with Audit essentially to invite this piece of work because we felt very strongly that it was an area that needed looking at closely. As Cindy said, there is of course a duty on public sector bodies to comply with the Equality Act, but I think what form that takes is often different, and I think a lot of public bodies don't do as good a job as they should do of systematically factoring in equalities considerations into decision making at every level. And although Cindy looked specifically at first at the kind of EQA process, she was asking much broader questions, which I think were helpful questions about how we factor in equalities right the way through decision making, so that we're taking those considerations into account right at the beginning of the process. And I think there's a sort of nuts and bolts process question about the design of the form, but there is also a question about how we bring people with us so that those questions are being systematically asked, people are relying on the same kind of data sources, we're being honest where we don't have the data, or indeed where we're not sure about the impact that a decision will have, because quite often in the public sector there is a degree of unknowability, but that makes that point about tracking and monitoring the work that's done following a decision all the more important, which I think is something we could definitely do better as a local authority. And the spirit in which the team is kind of approaching the redesign of the equality impact assessment is really going back to first principles and saying, what are we trying to do when we're considering the equality's impact of a decision? And I think that's critical anyway. It's critical in light of some of the learning from Grenfell, but it's also critical given that the council faces major financial challenges and is likely to have to make some quite big changes over the coming years to its services. And so assuring ourselves and yours and elected members about the impact that we think that is likely to have or may have on people with protected characteristics is critical. The only other thing I would say is that the audit was done when we were kind of just finishing the Fair Action Plan. So a lot of the recommendations about a kind of more cross-cutting approach to equalities across the council. One of the challenges is, Jamie and I are here representing two services, but this is really everybody's business across the organisation. And I do think the Fair Action Plan goes some way to giving more kind of coherence to our work as an organisation, but as the audit found, there's more to do to make sure that runs through like a single thread through the work that we do.
Just to follow on from that, just to add, so ENT were also involved in sort of finalising the audit. So
Initials.
oh, so executive management team, so the executive directors plus Maxi. So they will be following up on this piece of work, and also we have qualities board, and they will be following up on this as well to ensure that the recommendations have been implemented in accordance to the dates that have been set. And we are sort of hoping that maybe this could be part of our continuous audit. So we will come back and be checking that this is still, because sometimes you would do a follow-up and everything's done. But I think actually this is probably a good piece of work that we can probably add to our continuous audit. Sort of last point as well. Obviously, our council plan, our Grenfell promise as well. I think it was good that we sort of did this piece of work first, because we're hoping that this will then feed into our cultural review as well. Some of our recommendations are already been implemented, so by the time our sort of promise to do our cultural review is done, hopefully some progress will be made, and that could be reported in there too.
Yes, sorry, John, yeah.
I thought this was a really good report. I really liked the practical, your summary of the practical areas that you're looking at. That's actually great. And particularly for the training and awareness, because as you say, it's got to be cultural, it's got to be across everyone. Because everyone's going to be involved both in the kind of actual quality impact assessments, but also in the kind of general approach. So I presume you've got some sort of ideas about how you're going to stimulate that kind of training and development.
Yes, we started to consider that already. I think for us, we just want to make sure it's meaningful. People carve out the time and get what they need from that training, and it's not seen as a tick box exercise. Absolutely. So making that meaningful, I think, would be really key to us. Yeah. And the other thing we've done just is already we've gone out to staff to ask them about how we approach the kind of redesign of the form and the process, because I think it's, as Jamie says, it's very important that this isn't treated as a kind of tick box exercise, which is the last thing that's done before a proposal is finalised. So getting some buy-in from staff at an early stage about what kinds of questions that they would find helpful to be asked, what kind of challenge, what kind of support they need, is really important.
And I guess if we're looking at it as a culture thing as well, it's how we really embed that and make it not a bit of something extra for staff to do, rather actually core to what they are, core to what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the monitoring aspect of it would also help as well, knowing that we'll come back and check as well. And I think even things like our key decisions, our executive decisions, where it sits in the report and whether that's been challenged effectively as well. And I think those who are looking at those reports, if they are effectively challenging, people will then have a think before they just put it into the document. And I think that goes into the culture piece. If everybody's thinking about it and asking the right questions and challenging where they need to, I think that will feed down and people will take more time to complete the form. And I think if once training is put in place and better understanding of what quality it is, what does it mean,
And why it's important,
and why it's important,
why we need to.
how is it going to impact residents, how it will impact staff. I think once the understanding is really there, I think that will also help as well.
Thank you. Look, I'm disappointed, frankly, because this should be bread and butter and it should be automatically already been done. So to actually see this report, yes, it's good to see it being picked up, but it just leaves me going, well, what's been happening for the last 15 years? Yeah, I was going to say decade, but yeah, 15 years. So I like the chairman, I've seen a TfL consultation where it had a massive 44-page equalities assessment at the back, and all talked about cutting these bus routes, and this was going to be the impact. And yet it still ignored it. It still won't cut the bus route. So for me, not only is it about doing it, it's actually that it becomes embedded and it alters the outcome. And my concern, and this is, I know in front of, I think, a different committee, we've had the standards that have been, the service standards that are meant to be being adopted, is actually, how do we really show this can make a difference and that it does make a difference? Because otherwise everybody's just going to say, you're paying lip service. Can I also state that somebody who wears glasses, you've wasted page and a half, column and a half with just a heading. It would be better with bigger font and across the whole page. But I genuinely sort of look at this. Mr. Chairman, if I can come back later, I'd also like to talk about the general report and the layout. But good work. We're playing catch up. And how do we? I genuinely would like to see this go elsewhere, and then give you another challenge, which is actually how do you make sure that the balance is correct? That yes, it's taken on board, but it doesn't become the driving factor in some decisions where actually it skews the decision because the assessment essentially goes, potentially this is the TfL answer, there were only 15 people affected under the equalities impact assessment, therefore we changed our whole service or we ignored it. It's also how you have that communication when you say, yes, we did do this assessment, but actually we thought on balance the service should still be delivered in that way, even though there are going to be people affected. Because that's the truth with a lot of these equalities impact assessments, that actually rarely is there something that we as council do that isn't going to impact somebody, and it's a question of how do you get the balance right, and also how do you then communicate it.
Maggie, sorry, can you just?
Yeah, I just wanted to just respond on the general point, because it, as Cindy said, it did go to EMT and to executive directors and to Maxine, and we were disappointed too. And I just wanted to stress that we were disappointed, but recognise that what was said was correct. And so then we move on to see there's an opportunity to improve and to get it right. Which is what Jamie have reflected. So yeah, I think that's just important to make that point. And that disappointment was shared by officers, and the report has, in that sense, it's done what the intention of the report is.
I do want to add that though, although the report did pick up some points for improvement, there are some good things that we do at RBKC, and I think it's also really important to highlight. We do recognise that from where we were pre-Grenfell up until now, we've actually made progress, but there's still lots to do because of our starting point. So there are pieces of work that RBKC have done, which I've also noted in the report around those practice, which obviously you would see that there. And so, yes, we were disappointed. We would like to be better, but it's a work in progress. And I believe that, with Joe and Jamie and actually EMT being involved in this, and Maxine is heavily interested in this, I do think improvements will be made. I've already gone back to do not official follow-up, but just a check-in to see, where the service are in terms of implementation, and they are making progress already. So it matters to the council, and that's good to see. The actions are actually happening, progress is happening already, and the report's only not been out long. So
yeah, thank you. And as Mike said, we certainly shared that disappointment with Councillor Garden. I think it's worth saying that this is an organisation, I've been here just almost for 8 years. This is an organisation that didn't really have much of a corporate centre when I joined after Grenfell. It didn't. So I think what Cindy found in the audit was that those equalities considerations were being factored in, but there wasn't the level of kind of systematic consideration that you would expect to see through all decision making. So I think the challenge for us is to build a corporate approach that really means that everybody across the council is doing the same kind of thing. And I think that is a journey. It's definitely, as the audit finds, a journey that we're still on, and it's one where we've made some progress because there weren't those kind of systematic considerations before. On the broader point, I think that the data is critical. So in order you can have a 45-page quality impact assessment, and I've seen many that don't really say very much, whereas actually what you want is, and you want to be clear where you do know something and where you don't know something, and where you will need to do further follow-up or monitoring to understand the impact of something. I mean, I see a quality impact assessment as part of the broader advice that officers give to members to inform decision making. And I think good decisions are made on the basis of robust information. As you say, sometimes there will always be impacts to decision making, but it's important that members make an informed decision about whether that impact is justified in this particular case. But again, that relies on having good data that is used systematically, rather than treating the equalities impact as an add-on, and then you're able to take a decision in the round based on the information in the equalities impact assessment, but also other kinds of considerations, financial or other.
And I know we are doing this, but it's also important in the training to include members as well.
Yes, yeah.
We've done one, or we've got one coming up, I think.
On ED&I QAs. That part from.
Anyway, we need to make sure that members are including that. Yeah. Councillor Gordon, did you have?
So just on the actual revised report, I found it actually a little harder to navigate because you split it into critical risk and non-critical risk and council plan priorities, which actually I think suspect to some of my independent colleagues was more of a sort of field to navigate. But I particularly found on 362, the completed follow-up reviews, I just didn't get any sense of which ones were high. I could get the sense that one of them was a low, but I could not tell of the recs that were still in progress what level they were, and that would be really helpful. But I felt that some of the bar charts really didn't have anything, and it would be better not to have them. I also, for example, on 364, where you talk about 2 audits that are yet to come, which is just above the bar chart. What are you planning to do with planning? I mean, it's a very large throwaway heading. Do you literally go in and review planning from the top to bottom, or will you look at an aspect of planning? It's above the bar chart. 2 audits.
Oh, right.
That's to come.
Yeah. It's actually very specific. It's about income.
Yeah, so it's about accuracy of data, financial data that's coming through.
So perhaps when you actually are listing the audits, either the audits in progress or yet to come, if you could give us that level of granularity, that would be very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just a question really, on when you're auditing sort of quasi outside bodies like schools, what power do you have to follow up and ensure that they're doing the actions?
The same that we have for everywhere.
Right.
Because the council's asked to do the work, the schools know it has to be done. It's not overly onerous. It's 5 years, and it's not the follow-up in between. And it's not really a problem. Sometimes we have to push them.
Okay, good. Darren.
I had just one question. Thanks for putting the risks against them. Yeah, that's if you can possibly say what those are. I can't remember what risk one is. So long. I know you just put a snappy title for each one, because I'm sure you recall the risks. You look at them and you think, well, I'm not quite sure. You'll take that several times, but you could just put. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with it. It was just a question of space, I think.
I think.
Excellent. Thank you, Chairman. Just on page 366, just trying to understand appendix 2, or the tick the housing one. Could you just remind me when in the first column, the original audit was September 2023, and then there's a follow-up and then a follow-up in progress, and then in the middle column, the last line, it says due January 24, then the revised date March 25, and then status 31st of August column delayed due to staff changes to review in 2025. So it seems a bit confusing. Firstly, I'll try and break down my questions. Is there a timeline in which you have to start an audit and close an audit so that you can actually say if I start an audit, let's say in September 2023, by July 2024, you should have had the answers. And if you haven't had the answers, that's a red flag to flag to someone that you haven't had the answers.
Yeah.
If it then goes to September 25 and it says it's in progress, this looks like 2 years and you haven't got the answer that we need.
Yeah.
So I'm just a bit, maybe you said this before, is there a timeline by which you're supposed to ask for information and get it back? And if you haven't got it back, you then say there's a red flag there. There's 2 years.
It is quite a difficult thing to put across and explain in a couple of lines, but when you do an audit, yes, the final report might have gone out September 2023, but there could have been a number of different dates for different recommendations to be implemented. Rather than spend a lot of time going backwards and forwards with them as each one of those comes up, what we tend to do is wait till the last one is due and then ask them where they are with it. Depending on the significance of it, we will also then go do some testing. Quite often we find, as you can see from the tables in there, that there's some that are partially implemented, so we can't actually prove that they've been fully implemented. There can be very good reasons for that. It's very hard to put all of that into something this very small, that's so small. I'm saying the better way of doing that, I think. Some of the follow-ups, I will put my hands up and say started too late. We were so busy getting on with audits that the follow-up slipped. We're now getting a little bit better at that, I think. Also, we used to use a lot of contractual staff to do our audit work, and they used to follow them up. They weren't very good at doing that. We then had to take it in-house to do the follow-up, so we're on a bit of a catch-up. So there are some older ones in there, I apologise, which are taking a little while to get through the system, but we're trying to get better at that. In fact, that's one of our performance indicators, is to improve on the delivery of the follow-up reports in a timely manner. It's not very clear. I'm really sorry. I have to try and think of a different way.
Well, we have the opportunity to ask
Yeah,
you these
yeah.
questions. Sometimes you can't.
It's quite complex.
So maybe one suggestion would be when, obviously you can't give us sort of 500 pages, but one suggestion would be that if you've got sort of 5 or 6 items and you've only done 2, then we can see at a glance that the reason it's open and uncompleted audit is because you've got outstanding items. Which is what would happen in the corporate sector, so that you would be clear. The final point I make on the delay due to staff changes, I think I've made this point before, that as far as I understand, every department has got an executive director, it's got a 151 and then a vaccine, so it's always somebody at the top that knows what's going on in their department. So if somebody disappears or leaves or goes somewhere else, in the corporate world, someone else will just pick up the file and just give you the answers. Here, we often say that there's staff changes, so there's delay or we haven't got information. Is there a problem that we need to resolve so that the person who's above the person that's left can have access to that person's data to give it to you, so that there wouldn't be a delay based on staff changes? Because the council office has always got people in it, and departments always seem to have people in, and the executive directors are always there because they always come here to talk to us. So in our world, in the commercial world, there's always somebody who can go, well, Sydney's left, but I've looked at the papers, I can give you what you need. But it doesn't seem to happen here. I just question.
Yeah, yes, in ideal world that would be the case. Yes, there is somebody there, but they wouldn't necessarily have the granular detail about what we were discussing. So, for example, one person was looking at different options for a stock management system. That person then left, and someone else, there was a gap. Someone else came in, and they actually said, "Right, you know what? I don't think that's the right thing. I think we need to go for this." So they're starting again almost. So there was part of progress made. Great, they're looking for a system, and then someone else comes in and says, "Yeah, but we can't really afford that. What we would do is this instead. Would that do?" Great, but there's been a delay, and it's not necessarily something that a director or an executive would necessarily know about. It's very granular detail about recommendation.
So really what you're saying there is delay due to staff changes. It's not actually, it is due to staff changes, but it's not due to a gap
Well, yeah,
as such.
I know there was one there where there was a resource issue within the team because somebody who was meant to be doing something actually was over but passed away, so they needed to fill the job. I mean, it's awful, but it's true. So sometimes there are very good reasons why it hasn't gone out. It's not the priority for them necessarily. If it was a high priority recommendation, I would suggest they would. Is there need? I don't think there are any highs.
No, I think
that
was
encouraging to see that.
Yeah.
You'd be following up on the high ones.
Yeah.
Before, across the board, but they
Before
tend
you kind
to
Yeah.
continue to sort of said, oh, there's some medium ones and so on. Yeah, and they've done a bit of it. They haven't quite done all of it, and that's the bit you have to keep chipping away at, and that can be quite hard work to get them.
And hopefully these are the exceptions. Of
Yeah.
But in other cases where staff leave, you do get a response from somebody above or below or a replacement.
Yeah.
Because as you say, those staff are still there. But so these should be the exceptions where that's not been possible.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for the discussion on that. I am going to suggest that the equalities one comes back to us at some stage, probably 6 months, 9, a period of time when things have happened, and we can begin to see the impact of the impact is happening.
Yeah.
The official follow-up would be taking place sort of January, February time. So we'll be looking at recommendation, looking to see progress. But I think in terms of recommendations, do we have up until we've got quite a few being implemented in July 2026.
I think something before that would be.
Yeah, so
would be good.
the follow-up will be in sort of January, February time.
So that.
Yeah.
So
if you've got
January and one in March.
So let's do the March one.
yeah.
Good, thank you very much. So committee, the committee considers comments of internal audit and board appointment. We happy with that?
Yeah.
That discussion?
Yeah.
Some very good points there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
And we now move to item number 6, please, which is seven, sorry. So, in terms of the track is to advise the committee on progress against actions agreed at previous meetings. Anybody who's got the tables there? Any particular comments that anyone wants to raise on any of those issues? Dara.
So I said one on the first item, which is cybersecurity briefing. That's been outstanding for a while. Is that what you're going to say?
Then for that one, the issue is that the head of the person in charge of DDT, Darren has been tried to arrange it. There's been issues with his availability, and then there's been issues with availability of chairs. But what we were planning to do is to circulate a briefing to the chairs and then invite them to make comment on anything that on Darren's update.
That's a great question. So, is it possible that Darren's deputy digital information?
That's what I'm looking at, get him to do it.
I think a written paper is not really, going to do.
Yeah, I think he obviously it's not a one-man department. I'm just asking. I reckon one thing has got to have lots of people in there. Cybersecurity department, IT.
Yeah, we've got cybersecurity.
Yes.
Information governance. That's the word.
Not so one person.
So we can arrange for her.
Can we put a little bit of energy behind that and get
Can I just ask, the attendees are essentially the select committee chairs, which therefore ignores the independent members here. Is that what's intended? I'm conscious that Tara particularly raised it every time.
Well, I mean, we can go as wide as it needs to go, but also if it goes to chairs, it would also not include members on the committee who are not chairs.
Yeah.
So I guess we need to think about how wide it goes and whether everybody needs to and maybe there's a specific one for chairs and then one for members. I don't know. It's such an issue that we need to do it as wide as possible.
Can we make it audit and invite scrutiny chairs?
Yeah. Any other comments on the action tracker there, please?
Yeah, I've just got a couple. And on 194, a new template for environmental assurance reporting provided to the committee before the meeting on the 29th. Comments? I can't recall. Did I get that?
No, it hasn't been picked up. Part of the thing is we need to start from somewhere, so we're trying to produce those change of the
I see.
report. We're looking to try and develop it to be a little bit more easy to read, a bit more of an overarching assurance report. And we needed to do this first, so apologies, we couldn't get anything to you before then, because we didn't really know what it was going to look
Okay,
like.
so could
But it
you
is a
just
work in progress.
amend the action track?
Please, yeah.
And then also in the minutes, the meeting, the July meeting, we had on page 3, the clarification provided on performance materiality. I can't recall having received that. That's not on the tracker. And then there was an amendment on page 10, there were amendments to the local code of corporate governance and the annual governance statement be circulated. I don't recall that, and that's not on the tracker.
Okay, so there's a couple of outstanding items there for us to action on.
Thank you. I just wanted to feedback on to the other outstanding items. Well, item 190. That is in progress, so I'm sorry it hasn't got to you yet. It's been a bit delayed. We have dealt with 191, and we should get a briefing note on that tomorrow. We didn't really want to send it out just before the meeting because you've got a lot of stuff to read just before this meeting, and it would have been quite heavy. Yeah, so it should be easy tomorrow. Apologies, it's later than it should.
Any other points? Thank you very much for any service to catch up on that. So that ends our meeting. The next meeting of the Audit and Transparency Committee is scheduled to take place at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, the 26th of January. Should I or should I not wish you? Too early. Okay. I look forward to seeing you in 2026. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike and Moira. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
That's a risk.